Philadelphia, who served as a militia officer in the American Revolutionary War, is going to read the Declaration of Independence. On July 8, 1776, he made the first public proclamation of the Declaration of Independence, reading it from the steps of the Pennsylvania State House, now Independence Hall in Philadelphia. So I'll turn the floor over to Colonel Nixon.
Thank you. And no, they didn't have a sound system back then, so indulge me. But before I read the Declaration, I just want us to just take a minute, and actually a couple minutes, and just put ourselves back in that time, in 1776, when this nation was being formed. Philadelphia at the time was the largest of the colonies, largest city in the colonies, about 30,000 people. It was hot. No air conditioning, no electric fans. The windows of the Pennsylvania House, what is now called Independence Hall, were shut. Why? Flies and secrecy. Imagine you're on Chestnut Street in Philadelphia. The brick building is imposing but plain by today's standards. No tourists, no velvet ropes, just dusty streets, horses, horse-drawn carriages, and the smell of summer. Sweat, manure, printer's ink from the presses down the street. If you walk up the steps and past the guards, you're entering the most consequential room in American history. Noted historian Ken Brooks made a quote a few months ago that this is probably the single biggest event in human history since the birth of Jesus Christ. The assembly room is about 40 feet by 40 feet, low ceiling, wood floor, covered in sawdust to muffle the footsteps. The walls are plastered and painted pale green, finished with simple wooden chairs and benches brought in for the 56 delegates. At the front sits a single chair. It's called the Rising Sun Chair, where George Washington would later use it during the Continental Convention. In 1776, John Hancock sits there as president of the Continental Congress. No sound systems, not like I have. No cameras. Light comes from tall windows and candles that drip smoke. Ink pots, quill pens, and stacks of paper set on every desk. And flies. So many flies, in fact, that John Adams complains to his wife Abigail in letters about the flies. Look around. You're not seeing legends in powdered wigs on marble pedestals. You're seeing tired, sweaty, scared men. Average age about 40. Ben Franklin is the oldest at 70. Famous, witty, sleeping through some debates. Thomas Jefferson at 33 is tall, red-headed, quiet, and terrible at public speaking. He'd rather write. John Adams is short, argumentative, and can't sit still. Edward Rutledge of South Carolina is 26. He's the youngest. These guys didn't agree on much. They were lawyers, merchants, printers, planners. Some think independence is reckless. Others think it's overdue. They're dressed in wool coats and waistcoats in 90-degree heat. Why? That's what gentlemen wear. Decorum matters, even when you're committing treason against the most powerful empire on earth, because that's what this is, treason. If they lose, every man here is killed. Forget the movies where everyone speaks in grand speeches. It's June and July. For weeks, it's a debate. Hot, tedious, frustrating debate. Adams called it the greatest question ever decided. And they argue every inch. Should we declare independence now? Wait for foreign help? What about the colonies that aren't ready? New York's delegation isn't even authorized to vote yes yet. Voices rise. South Carolina and Georgia walk out over the slavery language in Jefferson's draft. Tempers flare. Then they break for dinner and beverages at City Tavern and come back at it. The real drama isn't a single moment, it's a grind. Day after day of talking, compromising, and persuading. This isn't a ceremony, it's a business meeting where the business is revolution. July 2nd, 1776, that's the actual vote for independence. 12 colonies vote yes, New York votes abstains. John Adams thinks July 2nd will be the day we celebrate with pomp and parade. Guns, bells, and bonfires. He was off by 2 days. July 4th is when they approved the final wording of the Declaration. Jefferson's draft was edited hard. The Congress cut 25% of it. They removed his attack on the slave trade because Southern delegates wouldn't support it. That's the hard truth to sit with in this room. Then comes the signing. It didn't all happen on July 4th. Most signed August 2nd or later. Imagine Hancock taking that quill and signing his huge signature. Quote, so the king can read it without his spectacles. Franklin's famous line, we must all hang together, or assuredly we will hang separately. Gallows humor, literally. Put yourself in their chairs. You've just signed your name to a document that ends, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. That's not rhetoric. British troops are in New York Harbor, the largest invasion force England had ever assembled. These men were wealthy. They have families, farms, businesses. Signing makes them targets. 9 would die during the war, many lost everything. Yet there's also electricity in the room. Richard Henry Lee said, it was the hinge on which the history of the world would turn. They knew it. You can feel the weight and the possibility, fear and hope, setting side by side on those wooden benches. On July 8th, the Declaration was read aloud in the State House yard. The Liberty Bell rings, people cheer, and also riot. They tear down the King's coat of arms. But on July 4th, 1776, the room probably went quiet after the vote. No band, no fireworks yet. Just the sound of quill pens scratching, candles sputtering, and 56 men gathering their papers in heat. When you walk out of Independence Hall today, it's quiet and climate controlled. In 1776, you walked out into a city holding its breath, about to be at war. So that's what it was like. Hot, tense, human, and improvised. Not a marble myth. A sweaty room where a group of flawed, brave men argued their way to an idea that would change the world. The idea that we can govern ourselves today. And it started with a bunch of guys in wool coats, swatting flies, deciding to risk everything on one sentence. So let's celebrate this birthday with a commitment to embrace the values our founding fathers envisioned, and may God bless these United States of America. And now, I'm going to read the Declaration of Independence. Unanimous Declaration of the 13 United States of America. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to ensure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, It is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute a new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and their happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. And accordingly, all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of those colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. He has refused his assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be obtained. And when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them. He has refused to pass other laws for accommodation of large districts of people, unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. He has called together legislative bodies in places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records, for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people. He has refused for a long time after such dissolutions to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise, the state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions from within. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states for that purpose, obstructing the laws of naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of lands. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. He has affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation, for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by a mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us in many cases of the benefits of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses, for abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies, for taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our governments, for suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny, already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages, and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation. He has constrained our fellow citizens taken captive on the high seas to bear arms against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands. He has excited domestic insurrections among us and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers the merciless Indian savages whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose charter is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to rule over a free people. Nor have we been wanting in attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our emigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity and have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. They too have been deaf to the voice of justice and consiguity. We must, therefore, acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation, and hold them as we would the rest of mankind, enemies in war, and peace in peace friends. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the restitute of our intentions, do, in name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are of right, ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all alliance to the British Crown, that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is now and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as a free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states might have a right to do, and for the support of this declaration, with the firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor.
Yeah.
Thank you.